Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barry Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. Whatever our status in life is, finance always play an important role in our lives. We are two women who are going to help us get through the whether we're single, divorced, widowed, or a single parent, and find out how we can handle our finances to enhance our lives. And with me are Patricia Ferrari from Philip Nizer, a divorce attorney, and also Stephanie Ackler from Ackler Wealth Management. And I would like to welcome you both.
How do you
Patricia,
do? Thank you.
Thank you. And Stephanie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
What would you suggest when somebody's analyzing their finances, the first thing they should do?
I think the first thing is to take a check of everything that they have. Patricia has certain check sheets, I have certain check sheets, and I think they complement each other wonderfully well. You know, we ask people to list, you know, where are all the assets that they have, their accounts, their account numbers, maybe the value of what they have. We ask them to maybe list their advisors, who are their accountants, maybe the other financial people they're working with, their attorneys, their insurance people. So we start to get a clear view of that, sort of their current worth today. Then we're also looking to see where are their tax returns. This starts to give a general idea of where people are and how and where we can go from there.
And of course, they shouldn't forget to look at their liabilities, which include the taxes to be paid, charge account liabilities, the debts that they still may owe for school education. All of these are going to comprise their basic financial picture. And only when they have a handle on understanding what that is, do they know how they can take steps to go forward.
What are some of the legal issues for each group that they should be addressing?
Well, I think Stephanie and I would both agree that very important to most people are such things as a will, especially if there are children or a spouse, or you want your assets to go in a particular way that the state, if it passes through the state laws, will send it in a different direction than the person might want. They would probably want to consider having a health care proxy, which is going to determine who is authorized to make health care decisions for them. Life insurance, if there are charges to be cared for after a person's death, whether it's a widow or children. These are the very basic things for financial reasons. After that, I would suggest
the power of attorney also.
The power of attorney, absolutely.
Because should someone become incapacitated
Yes.
in any of those states, you want to make sure you have given the power to someone to take care of your finances while you're still alive.
What would you say are the biggest mistakes that women make as they're getting married, preparing for marriage, in their finances?
Probably concentrating solely on the fun, wonderful, celebratory aspects that we all love. The dress, the friends, the wonderful feeling about it. It's such a joyous time. I've had several children get married, and there's nothing like it. But it is so easy to ignore the more important financial aspects that are going to govern people's lives. And in talking about this for your program, Stephanie and I agreed one of the most important things you can do is sit down and speak to your fiancé, to your husband, about how you want to run your financial lives.
Put the cards on the table. Sometimes it's the most difficult part of this is just starting the conversation. But I think women just need to come to the table with their soon-to-be spouse, their fiancé, their partner, and discuss how are the household finances going to be managed, where are the assets, how are we going to hold them, you know, sort of common goals that we might have together. And then look, I think there's a great purpose for each spouse, each partner to have assets in their own name. But I think as you're coming together in a union, there's probably that need now to have a joint account. it's important for women to understand what are the costs to keep a household going, where's that money coming from, where's the insurance protection. There are a number of these issues that just, it's starting the conversation, continuing to have the conversation, and really quite honestly, I think, demanding to be part of that conversation.
Exactly. And understanding, too, that when a spouse signs a joint return, he or she are both liable on that return. The government can come after either party, and will. When a spouse signs a mortgage that obligates that person to continued payments, that person is liable whether or not he or she has a job. So when they're going into these situations, they have to stop and think, what is the responsibility when they sign it, and how are they going to fulfill that responsibility?
Would you say that women are more educated today than they were 20, 30 years ago, or are they at the same level that they were yesterday?
I think there are some that I see coming into my office that are much more educated, much more savvy, much more aware, much more willing to take charge. But unfortunately, there are numerous women that I do come in contact with who, still the idea of a checking account is a new phenomena. And fortunately, that's not the norm as I think it was maybe 20 years ago. But still, there's a lot of women that haven't taken part in educating, understanding an investment portfolio, making sure they're reading statements, understanding where the assets are in the household.
What about a prenuptial?
Prenuptials are becoming much more common. I'm startled at the increased amount in my practice. I've been working in this field for almost 30 years, and each year there's a geometric progression. And interestingly, it's not just the situations that used to be where you'd have people coming in who were marrying for a second or a third time. They wanted to make sure the assets were going to their children or grandchildren from a first marriage. Now you have young people who are coming in not only with assets and degrees that are now subject to what we call equitable distribution if there's a divorce, but I've got couples who come in with virtually very few assets, but they are looking forward to accumulating assets. They want to know in advance how they're going to be divided if there is a divorce. People are much more realistic about divorces now, and they understand that if they don't make these decisions in advance, a court may later, and it's certainly going to lead to a lot more fighting. The problem is, and I constantly warn people, it's one thing to do a divorce and look back and see what the track record was and decide what is a fair apportionment of assets and support. It's another thing to do it when you're working with a crystal ball because it's cloudy and one doesn't know what's going to happen during the course of a marriage.
How do you anticipate what's going to happen? I mean, is there a fair and equitable distribution?
Well, one very fair way to many people would be to say we're going to divide everything halfway. But frankly, if that's going to be the plan, you probably don't need a prenuptial agreement. People want to know, for instance, if there is a family business, that a new spouse is not going to come into that business and be able to invade it in ways the people are not going to like for discovery or for other reasons. They want to protect that. They want to protect the family money. And so for these reasons, sometimes it's not even the young couple who want the prenup. Sometimes it's
the parents,
the family. And they will come and say, we're bringing our son or our daughter. And at first, people are, they think that they're controlling the situation and possibly it leads to tense feelings. It's a difficult time to get through. But if everybody stops, takes a deep breath, and understands what it is that has to be accomplished, hopefully you can do it with a minimum of tension.
Well, what happens after the prenup? I mean, you hear all these celebrities and the problems that they're having. Well, they have an ironclad prenup, but yet somehow they're able to break them, or they're not able to break
Well,
them?
in fact, prenuptial agreements are definitely supported, particularly in the state of New York. There's a very definite feeling that assuming that you have met the indicia for a valid agreement, which is disclosure of assets to the other party, and that it wasn't done with fraud or duress, and that the parties, particularly if the untitled spouse is entering into this agreement without counsel, that might be a problem. But if those indicia are met, a prenuptial agreement is very definitely a binding agreement. And partly I think it's because the courts say you agreed to this when you weren't fighting. Why should we set it aside when you are? I also think it's partly that there are so many divorces in New York, or in many states, and the courts are trying to cut down on some of the court backlog. So if there is an agreement, they're much more inclined to support it than not.
What general legal documents would you recommend for people to make sure that they have?
A will is quite necessary, a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney. Those are the three that I think basic agreements, legal documents that you need, and make sure your attorney has a copy, but also someone close to you has them. I mean, these aren't something you want to just keep locked in the safe deposit box, because if you're incapacitated, you want to make sure the person who has power of attorney is able to use it.
Briefly discuss the different insurance needs that people need.
I think there are a few, and we can certainly go into it. Life insurance, I think, is very important, particularly if there are dependents or you're relying on some type of a dependent care. That's where I think a life insurance policy can come in.
Children to be educated, families to be raised. And now it's much more common for wives to have life insurance too. It used to be just the husbands because they were the wage earner. But now that you've got two-income families, if you lose the wage of either party, you're going to have a loss.
And it becomes a very big issue. It's not year one, year two, but it's that earning capacity over a longer period of time. So I think that life insurance is a big insurance issue. Homeowners insurance, and maybe homeowners insurance if we step back and say if you're unmarried, your partners in a situation, you want to make sure each partner has that homeowner protection or rental protection on each of their property, because it could be a homeowner's policy covers just one person. So again, something just to long-term care insurance, I think, is a big issue, particularly with aging women. And it could be that as a spouse dies or there's a widow, something shifts from the life insurance needs into the long-term care needs.
And certainly health insurance.
Yes.
No one in this day should be without health insurance.
If you can afford it. A lot
If
of
you
people
can afford
can't
it,
afford it. It's so expensive.
Yes.
It's a big issue, but particularly to have at least the catastrophic health care insurance for a hospital stay, at least try to get something on that line.
When somebody is looking for a financial advisor, what things should they keep in mind? References
are a very good point in terms of looking for a financial advisor. Interviewing more than one financial advisor. I think to at least go and speak to 3 is very helpful. Chemistry, I always say to people, chemistry is a big, are you able to speak to someone, feel that your questions are being answered, feel that there's a depth of knowledge that the person's able to help you with, see who else is behind that person, is it an institution, do they have a team, what are the credentials, how long have they been in the business, how long have they been with the firm. You'd like to see a longer track record. I think you don't want to find someone that's very abrupt in answering your questions. You don't want to find someone that's jumped from this firm to that firm to that firm. I'm a chartered financial analyst, which was a 3-year program to go through, and sort of a PhD of investment, so to speak. A CFP is a certified financial planner. So there are different degrees, different certifications to ask people about. Those are a number of the issues I think that are very important in terms of having someone that you're comfortable working with your money. Patricia, as a divorce attorney,
yes,
what are some of the things that people should ask a divorce attorney when they're going in?
Okay. Generally, what you want to do is have the opportunity to tell your story to the divorce attorney. Tell them about the marriage, tell them why you think it's coming to an end or why there are problems, what they are, the nature of them. Tell the person about the financial issues in your marriage to the extent you're aware of them, and give them enough of a picture that will give them the ability to give you comprehensive answers. In my experience, a minimum amount of time that would take would be anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes. At that point, what I usually do will sit and tell the person what the law is in the state of New York, which is where I practice, how it applies to that person and the situation I've heard, and then what my recommendations are. By that point, the person and I have had enough of an interchange that I'm getting a feeling for him or her and vice versa. And frequently you'll go off on tangents, hearing things that the person didn't mention the first time, and you'll explain it a little more. By the end of the hour and a half period of time for consultation, you really should have answered the critical issues and given the person a feeling about what it is he or she is contemplating and what the goals are they should have in going through this divorce. By that point, the person has hopefully understood what you've said, possibly asked further questions, and has something really to think about and decide, is the divorce process the appropriate solution for this person? Are you the right lawyer for the person? And then it's time to talk about fees. And it's astounding how few people will, in fact, I generally will bring it up when they don't. And it's because I think they think that, they're not, and I see this more with women, they're not permitted or it's not nice to talk about money. So can they ask about fees? And when they do, it's generally in a very cursory way. Well,
because they're not comfortable?
Not comfortable, and they think they're, in effect, prying. What my fee structure is, how I charge, and maybe they may even think they may have a quarrel with it, but they're afraid to say it. So my solution is to sort of set the stage by telling them what it is, and then pointing out different things they might want to know more about, and hopefully we'll get into a dialogue. Because in fact, the fees are going to be a very significant portion of that divorce. It's going to, and because both parties are probably going to have lawyers, the fees are going to have some impact on them deciding whether to go ahead and with what lawyer and how they're going to pay for this along with all the other things. So it's critical that they understand that, and it will relieve a lot of the tension going through the case.
Well, they shouldn't charge me.
Oh, yes. You know, it's astounding how many, and particularly women, still think that lawyers, accountants, professionals, you know, just, they don't have to get paid, at least not by these people, because they're so used to their spouses paying it. And then the second favorite line is, well, I didn't want this divorce. Why do I have to pay for the fees? I was like,
but there are a lot of women who have not been used to writing checks.
Yes.
They've not been either used to accumulating assets on their own, truly being responsible, or really writing checks for services, which is different than donating money, gifting money. But to really write a check for services rendered is for a lot of women something they've not come up against.
Indicative of a certain age group, or is it across the board? It doesn't matter, it just depends on how they were brought up?
I think it's business experience. I mean, I think there's some women who have business experience, so it comes how some women were brought up. Certainly, they were encouraged to take control of their finances, a checkbook. They understand how to, balance a ledger. But then there are others. It's a very new phenomena.
I think the people who have had contact with advisors, counselors, professionals understand that there are services and they are paid for just as you pay for a doctor or a dentist, or you go into a store and you buy goods. It's a fee that is set by the work that's done, and certainly in many cases it's negotiable. But it is very important for people to come to grips with it early on so that as they work through the process, they understand it.
A divorce, and their husband said, "This is all that we have," but yet she's not really comfortable with that. She thinks there's more.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How can she uncover the more?
On her own, one of the most important things she can do, and I recommend this for everyone, no matter what their domestic situation is, be familiar with the financial documents, which is what really Stephanie started out by saying. Critical to that are the tax returns. The tax returns will give that person or her lawyer or accountant so much information. Secondly, know where the checkbook is. The joint checks or separate checks. Now, it may be that the husband keeps those books at his office, but the wife should know what is the rent or the mortgage they pay. How much does she spend on food, on children's clothing, on her own personal needs? She can start putting together that kind of a picture, and then, and also watch the mail when it comes in. If there's a letter from a bank, a letter from a securities brokerage house, a letter from an accountant, what she wants to know is those names, and that's what she gives to an attorney. And then even if the attorney doesn't have the records, the attorney is going to know how to go about uncovering that information.
Another part is stock options. Sometimes what you find is your spouse may have a lot of wealth tied up into the business, so to speak, or where they're working.
Mm-hmm.
And it's having knowledge of where the 401k monies, where are there stock options, are they vested or they're not? Because sometimes there's a lot of maybe illiquid money that are assets, but they're not part of the daily household picture.
That's right.
So it's those angles too.
Yes, and these can be intimidating terms that Stephanie's just used, 401k plans, pensions, but in fact, that's what the lawyers or the accountants are trained to analyze, to investigate, and to value. When all of those items, assets, and liabilities are on the table for everybody to examine, suddenly the offers start to change because the alternative is to go to court. And the court is going to look at them and divide them up on a much fairer basis. But the problem with that is it gets very expensive. So anytime you've got two people who can settle their own case, it's so much better for them.
Is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with?
I think we both want to say a version of how women really have such a wonderful ability to take charge of this once they get into it, to empower themselves in terms of learning and feeling secure in a way they don't when they don't have this information. And I would just encourage them to do it. There's so many opportunities, evening adult education programs, the daily news columns that Stephanie has referred to. It's there for the taking, and you don't have to do it all at once.
And there's so many people who are willing to sit down and help. You know, the advisors, people, you start asking, talking, asking questions. There's not a stupid question. The question you have that you're fearful of asking, 3 other people down the street have that same question. So you ask, and you ask it again until you understand the answer. And it becomes more and more empowering, that learning curve that we often see women start to go on. And it's very exciting. And they thrive once they have the power.
Yeah.
Or know they can have the power.
One of the most exciting things for me in representing a woman, but particularly I think of the ones who have come in fearful, intimidated, embarrassed at how little they know, and through the process, as they become educated, it's just such a, you're watching somebody flower, take confidence in themselves, and have a sense of security that is it's unquantifiable. You can't put money on it, but they walk out of the office at the end of that process knowing they can take care of themselves.
Yeah, it's a
Nothing
flower.
is better than that.
It's a flower
Really is.
blooming. It really is.
Beautiful.
It really is.
I have to thank you both so much for all this information. I'm sure our audience has enjoyed it as much as I have.
It's been
Patricia,
a pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. And
Barry,
Stephanie, thank you.
It was a real pleasure.
I hope you've learned something about how to become a more powerful woman in handling your finances.